This is The Second Studio, hosted by the Architecture and Design Office fame. My name is David Lee, and with me is Marina Borderonay. The two of us are architects, partners at the office, and of course, hosts of the show. And today, we are talking about construction administration, which is a service that architects provide, a critical service. And at the beginning of the recording, we describe, why we're talking about this, so I won't get into that here. So with that said, sponsors.
Available with Revit version 2023.1 onward, Autodesk Insight is a next-generation carbon analysis tool that can help you make the leap to low-carbon design. With only a few clicks, Insight lets you analyze, understand, and track the embodied and operational carbon impact of your design choices. You can then visualize opportunities for energy efficiency and carbon mitigation with its flexible dashboards, helping you make more sustainable and informed decisions. Check out the Insight link in our show notes to find out more. This episode of The Second Studio is brought to you by BQE Core, the all-in-one firm management software built for architects. Designed by architects for architects, Core helps you track time effortlessly, manage projects seamlessly, and get paid faster so you can focus on design, not spreadsheets. With powerful automation and real-time insights, it's everything you need to run a smarter, more profitable firm. See how BQE Core can transform your practice by clicking the link in our show notes.
This is The Second Studio with myself and Marina. Here we go. So starting off, why are we talking about construction administration today, aside from the fact that we've had listeners write it and say, can you please talk about construction administration?
Well, I think it's a phase and a service that architects provide that probably most clients aren't aware of.
Yeah.
I think people hire architects to basically do the design, right? Do the cool floor plans, the rendering, the 3D model, select materials, show views, get into the concept of the design thinking. But I don't think clients are aware that architects are also very heavily involved during construction as well. And they're heavily involved during that construction administration service that they provide. And I think because people are ignorant of this being an existing services, therefore they don't know and they don't think that they need it, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important for us to explain what it is and why you shouldn't be skipping that.
You should not be skipping CA. You should not be skipping leg day at the gym. So what is construction administration at a high level? So first, again, it's the service that architects provide during construction. So it begins as soon as construction starts or right after the GC is onboarded, and it finishes when construction is fully complete. Either that's when you have your certificate of occupancy, or in our case, in most cases of architects, it's when everything's done. Like you're fully done and you're moved in and you're good to go. That's when CA finishes. The purpose of construction administration, or CA, is basically to help ensure that the vision we have created during design gets executed and realized in reality. That's the purpose of CA.
Yeah, so the role of the architect during CA is not really to supervise what the GC is doing, because that's not what we're there for. It's really more to be an advocate for the client and for the project, right? To make sure that the design, the intent of the design gets built.
Yeah, and I know for listeners who have never heard of CA before, it's probably confusing, because it's like, wait, so you're overseeing the contractor, but you're not really overseeing them. Where's that? What are you doing in that gray zone? And one way to describe it is, so the architect is not inspecting the work. Yeah. So if you look at any architect's contracts, at least in the United States, when it describes construction administration, it does not say inspect. It says oversee or provide oversight. So there's a little bit of distance, right? Because at the end of the day, all of us do have to trust the contractor and their subs to be doing their work correctly. But the architect doing CA is like that extra layer, not extra, but it's a layer of protection to make sure things actually turn out well. And it's again, to your earlier point, it's people think that you did the design, you did the permit drawings. That's the other thing that people think we do, which is what architects do provide. And then you're done, right? And then you just hand off the construction documents to the contractor and see you later, architect. We'll call you if something happens, nothing else. That is not what's supposed to take place.
Yeah, and I think, it's kind of like what, again, as a side note, what we do is kind of weird, right? Because we design things, we put all of the things that we want in drawings and technical forms, right? And then we hand it to someone and we expect that person to be able to build it exactly the way we imagined and designed it, right? So it seems like the chances of that working out are really low, because the GC is not in your head and he doesn't really know what was the intention behind some of those things. And to be truthful too. Like there is not, you can't draw everything from for a building. We draw as much as we can, and the most important information that needs to be communicated. But the nuance and the sensibility is not something that could be put in technical drawings. So the CF phase is really kind of a teamwork where the architect is checking on the contractor mostly to make sure that he understands the intention, because we know that there is a lot that goes into a building, and you can't rely on that one person to get it all right.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and we're maybe getting ahead of ourselves, but again, people think, well, you've produced the construction documents, and on this show and on our office, we're always preaching about the importance of being very thorough and detailed in your construction documents. Document everything as much as possible, because those are the blueprints that are going to be built from. So again, like if you have that thorough set, then why would you need any kind of additional oversight? And the reason really it comes down to is that buildings are just really, really, really complex. And like you said, no drawing set is going to include everything. There's going to be things that occur in the field that causes our game plan to have to shift, right? We're going to have to come up with things and problem solve on the spot, so to speak. So those are the biggest reasons. I think the buildings being very complex is the biggest reason for CA that people don't quite get.
Yeah, and if you're building a shed in your backyard, if you have a good architect that did like 4 pages of drawings and they're great, you have a good GC, you probably don't need CA, right? But if you're trying to build something that's well designed and well built, you're going to need that.
It also, you were saying an interesting point of that the contractor, in order for the contractor to complete a house, let's say, without any CA provided by the architect and do it as well as if there was an architect providing CA, that would require the contractor to have the same design sensibilities, the same design skill set, the same design thinking as the architect, which they don't because they're not an architect, they're a GC. And they would also have to somehow understand all of the more like meta design, conceptual reasoning of the project that has been built up between the architect and the client. So if the architect and the client are working together for 9 months, a year, depending on the scale of the project, to design the house, produce the CDs, and do the permit drawings, all of that back and forth and meeting and that conceptual information is embedded in the drawings. But again, like you said, it doesn't leap off the page, right? That's a lot of meta information, I'm calling it, that's embedded within the spirit of the project that the architect has in their mind, that the architect's team has in their brains, and the client has. When you onboard a GC, and let's imagine in this case, they're coming in brand new to the project. Once CDs, construction documents are done, they don't have that year's worth of relationship building and design intent, right? So they have to look at this massive set of construction documents that's like 100 pages long and try to digest all of that from a technical lens, from a schedule lens, from a budget lens, but then also try to decipher the design concept and what this wants to be to fill in the gaps. It's an impossible task. So to your point, that's why the architect and the contractor are kind of thought about more as a team during construction, because they both fill in each other's gaps.
So I guess people are probably wondering, what exactly does the architect do during the construction administration phase?
Yeah, so the first thing that we do is site visits. And how often we visit the site varies depending on the phase of construction that we're in. But site visits are very crucial because they allow us to be proactive in catching mistakes in the field. So I always like to say that construction administration is both a reactive service, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's also proactive. Proactive in the sense that we are going to the site on a, let's say, once a week basis, once every 2 weeks, again, depending on the phase, regardless of what's happening, regardless of whether or not there are any known problems. It doesn't matter if everything's going smoothly, we still go to the site because there's very likely something we'll catch where we need to fix it, problem solve it, or it happens to be that day that the contractor and their subs do have a list of questions for us.
Yes. The other thing that we do during CA is responding to what's called RFI. There are requests for information. People love acronyms. And RFI is basically kind of a formal process in which a contractor would submit questions for the architect or for the engineer. It doesn't have to be just for the architect. Anyone that's produced, construction documents could be issued an RFI. So let's say, I don't know, the contractor is looking at pouring foundation and he has questions about rebar. He would issue an RFI. He or she would issue an RFI to the structural engineer because the information either is not clear on the drawings, maybe he can find it, or maybe he has a better idea and wants to make some suggestions. So RFIs usually, are numbered. Sometimes if you work with bigger GCs, they have like an actual software that they use
to manage all of it. Yeah.
To manage and keep track, because depending on the complexity of the project, you can imagine if you build, I don't know, like a 5,000 square foot home or 10,000 or 15,000, there's going to be a lot of questions because
Hundreds.
the construction document set is going to be big, right? Yeah. And again, the GC is getting the set from all the people who drew those things and trying to understand it. So he's going through, each page is each drawing, analyzing and making sure they understand what's going on. So yeah, they typically, keep track of all the logs and the status of each. And it's expected from whoever the RFI is being issued to get an answer in a very timely manner, because this can impact the project schedule. So if an architect gets an RFI, usually you have to answer between 2 to 3 days. If it's a more complex RFI, you might need a bit more time. If you need back and forth with consultants, it's a bigger issue. It impacts other things than just our scope of work. Then, things could extend a little bit. But usually there is an understanding that there is a question and need an answer like ASAP.
Yeah. Yeah. And RFIs happen, of course, throughout construction. And to your point, I think like we worked with a contractor who will be not named, and they wanted to have the RFI communication method be done basically via text message, and that was it. And there were some cases, depending on the contractor, depending on the project, depending on the scale, depending on all these things, sometimes a quick text is totally fine. But when things become more complicated, we do need to have a way of archiving and organizing everything, because we need to be able to go back and find out what was said in case something doesn't get resolved, or worst case scenario, we're at a point in the project where something went horribly wrong, and now we don't know, like, why did this take place? Who was at fault? Which I hate to say, that in the recording, but that's the reality of doing complex projects with different parties.
And RFI can also happen before construction starts, when the GC is going through the drawings and all the way throughout construction. The other thing that happens during CA that the architect has to give input on is submittals and shop drawings. So anytime there is something that needs to be fabricated by someone, let's say windows, right? Usually windows are one of the most expensive items in construction, in building a house, especially if you're putting good windows
Glazing,
in. If you're not, then it's not the most expensive item.
Yeah, but steel windows.
But like if you're putting good windows in, you want to make sure you get it right? So before things are being manufactured, we usually receive what's called shop drawings, which is basically the drawings that the manufacturer is going to use to make the thing. So
I want to step in and ask a question as an audience member. So if the architect produces construction documents, what are shop drawings? Like, what are they not the same thing as shop drawings?
So the construction document we're providing is for, it's a kind of a tricky thing, right? Is for the building itself. We're not the ones actually designing elements that are being manufactured by a brand that's being sold to the client,
like windows,
right?
For example.
Like windows. Like, we're not making the product, so we're not detailing to that level. What we're detailing is how does this component gets put into the building. That's what we're drawing.
Another way to describe it, I was thinking about this today, is construction documents exist to convey the design intent of the project. Now think about that, because it sounds weird, because construction documents are known as being the technical blueprints of the house, which they are. But really, they exist to convey the design intent of the project. And then where the CDs stop is where the shop drawings pick up from. So another example is like millwork. When we're doing custom millwork in a house, there's a millwork fabricator or a craftsman, whatever you call them, and they produce their own shop drawings. And so we do millwork sections and details, which are quite detailed. We're specifying and calling out, the gaps between stuff, what kind of pulls, the angle of the cut, the speed of the wood, the grain of the wood, the grain pattern and direction, all that stuff. But there's another level of drawing beyond that, right? Where the fabricator, in this case of the millwork, is doing, and they're calling out how things are fastened together to assemble this thing, the exact final dimensions, which will be different from our dimensions in the CDs, because when they go to fabricate their millwork, framing is done, drywall might be done, and guess what? That finished dimension from drywall to drywall for this cabinet piece is going to be off slightly from our construction documents, right? So the shop drawings are like the final true technical documents that are being used to build and fabricate from. And like you said, it's our job to review them for design conformance. We don't review them for dimension purposes. Like the contractor is and their subs are meant to be, making sure that, again, that millwork piece, if we have, 12 feet, 2 inches, 2 and 1/16 inches, then it's going to be built to that exact dimension. Yeah. It's not my job to go to the field and measure that and make sure that they're building that way. My job is to say, okay, yeah, it looks like you have all the stuff I care about and how it looks in terms of design and performs is there, and I'm going to assume you're going to make it fit the opening that it's supposed to fit.
Yeah, and sometimes, like even for windows, for example, sometimes like we would, design a certain combination or size of windows, and maybe the manufacturer can do not a custom profile, but kind of like something that's accommodating, our design. Mm-hmm. And that, that's kind of cool because we get to really collaborate with the brand and see like how can we make things fit with what we're trying to do, which is also what happens a lot during the shop drawing phase.
Yeah, it's interesting because during the construction document phase, we are the ones producing the drawings. We're authoring the drawings and we own those drawings. But shop drawings, we don't produce those. We just review them and then have collaboration with the manufacturer. And so like you were talking about nail fins, I was just thinking about a project we're working on now where because of various things in the design and whatever else, the nail fins and the tabs, we are calling out and working with the window representative on it too and saying this specific unit typically have a nail fin here or a tab on the interior, remove that tab because we need to make this window extend down so it's flush with the floor, whatever. So we do get very involved, but we are not producing shop drawings.
No, and it's also good to be able to do that kind of like check up with the brand because they are reliable for their product, right? So
yeah,
there might be tweaks that we can make to their product to help us build and do it the way we need it to happen on our end, but they also need to make sure that their product is not failing by doing that.
Yeah.
So shop drawings is crucial, and it's also a time where you can catch things that haven't been picked up. Mm-hmm. Again, there is so many things that get put into a building that you could miss a thing or two. So shop drawing is kind of like the last check before things go into production.
Yeah.
There is also another thing that architects do sometimes, and I would say not in all projects, is to review pay application from the contractor as well as approving change orders. Mm.
Yeah. So pay applications is when the contractor says to the client, I've completed this portion of work, pay me for what I've done. And that's difficult for the client to review with any kind of expertise because they don't know anything about construction, presumably. So historically, the architect's been the one to review the work. Again, going on site saying, okay, yep, you've submitted a pay application for completing X portion of work. I see the work. It's done. It looks good. Yes, now you can be paid for that. And that's so, again, the architect acting as an advocate or agent of the client. This is a good example of that. Change orders is another one. So change orders are changes to the scope, schedule, or budget in the project, and the contractor would submit that. Anyone can submit a change order, but let's say the contractor could submit that to the client and say, well, what's a good example? Now we're outfitting this room in a certain way. This was not part of the construction documents. I didn't know it was here, and so now this is going to increase our budget, or construction costs because I have to pay for more materials to do this, or nicer materials. It's going to impact schedule. So it's a change order. So I'm submitting this to the client, the change order. You have to approve it so that we're all on the same page of like now we're going to move forward with this change order taking place. I was going to say that the reason why the architect's involved again is because sometimes, either intentionally or unintentionally, something gets submitted as a change order when it should not be a change order. And we've seen that more often than I would care to see it, where a contractor will say, this is a change order, I need more money to do it. And then, of course, the client is not an architect, so they're like, oh, sure, I guess. The architects, for us, will say, no, hang on a second, that's in the construction documents. Go to this page and it's there. So it's not a change order. If you miss that, this detail or this material, whatever it is, during your bidding, when you reviewed the CDs before you got the job, if you missed that and didn't account for that in your budget, that's on you.
Yeah, and so as a side note, a lot of, like, let's say the cheap contractors who would come up oftentimes with low bids because they voluntarily or involuntarily, missed information as part of their estimate, and then comes a rain of change orders and therefore a huge, budget increase, right? So change orders have kind of this scary reputation of like this thing that increase the cost. And if you have a contractor that's doing his job and is professional, there won't be that many on their side. That being said, in the residential field, there is a lot of clients who, as construction move along and they get involved and, they see their dream house, comes take form, they want to upgrade and do things a little bit better and nicer and or add things to the scope of work.
Yeah.
So oftentimes we see change orders coming from the client's wish list, kind of like growing as the construction goes by. And it's okay. I mean, as long as they're okay with, paying for those upgrades, like, it's fine.
Yeah. And I think that also highlights the role of the architect being an advocate or an agent or helper of the client all the way back to when they're onboarding the contractor. So, to your point, I would never hire a contractor without having an architect vet them for me if I was just a normal client.
Because how would you know?
How would you know, right? The other thing that we do during construction is manage design adjustments. So again, the design will always evolve and change slightly during construction, not because of change orders or things that the clients requested. There is that, yes, but also by necessity. This is, of course, easily understood when we talk about remodels. When you're doing a remodel, remodels are tough because no one really knows what's inside of the walls and the condition of the existing building until we start demolition or until we get to a certain point in the project, in construction. And so... And this happens in new construction too. There's unexpected stuff that just occurs. And so the architect has to revise the design or make small design changes. Now, there are small changes which don't impact the budget or the schedule or the scope. The architects can make on their own with a contractor without having to inform the client. It also depends on the client. Some clients, they don't want to be bothered with the small stuff, take care of it. Other clients want to know every single thing. It's fine. If a design change does impact budget, schedule, scope, then obviously the client needs to approve it. But yeah, we are involved in, so the other mistake too is that people think that it's easy to partition the different phases of a project. Okay, you've designed it, design is done. You've done permitting, permitting's done. You've done CDs are done. Now we're just going to build it. Ideally, yeah, we just go and build, and we do everything we can to have the construction process just be about building. But design continues throughout building. That's just the nature of doing buildings, really. And I think sometimes clients feel like, well, if I have a contractor who has a good design eye, can't I just work directly with them to fix these design issues? And, no. No is the answer, right? Not if you're really caring about the eventual quality and you're caring about design. You need to have the expert who understands it to be part of the conversation.
Well, it's like, I don't know, if you were asking Picasso to do a painting, but, you're like, well, his assistant is, knows him pretty well or could probably figure it out. Like, why did you hire Picasso to start with? Like, just hire the assistant, you know what I mean? Like, it is kind of weird.
Well, that's a good point too, though, right? Because construction is when all the money is being spent and when the bank account's getting drained just to build this thing. And it's also the most stressful, like, for sure. And so it becomes very easy during that phase to, like, start kind of, like, cutting out stuff and thinking, well, we can, like, kind of skim by with lesser people. But it's actually, you want to be doing the opposite. You want to be staying steadfast to the team and with the team to get it done correctly.
Yeah. The last thing that architects do is, of course, they do like what's called the punch list. We're not punching anybody, right? We're just kind of like looking at the punches that maybe the building had got during construction and kind of like trying to fix that.
Okay.
And what we call final review. So a punch list is basically, the building, the house is close to being wrapped up, like close to like get the good cleanup and handed the keys over to the client. But we need to make sure that everything looks good before the contractor, asked for his last payment and moved on to the next project.
Yeah.
So the architect will often walk the site or like the almost completed project. Oftentimes we like have a roll of blue tape and we put a piece everywhere. Basically, there is defects or things are not working. There is a door that doesn't close. There is a panel that's misaligned on a cabinetry wall. Yeah. There is a nick in the paint. This was installed in the wrong place. The floor has a board that needs to be replaced because it got scratched in the last, when the guys moved their tools. And, kind of like the small things, but it's kind of the last chance to get that stuff fixed before the crew is out and the contractor is gone. It's oftentimes also the last thing that the contractor needs to do to receive his or her final payment.
Correct.
Like if, let's say, you hired a GC and you did not want to have your architect do construction administration, I would not recommend paying the full amount until all of that stuff has been picked up, because what are the chances, they're going to come back and do it when they have the last check in their hands. So that's kind of what happens. It's common. Sometimes the punch list could be taken care of pretty quickly, depending on what needs to happen. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there is multiple rounds of punch lists. That's not fun. Yeah. But it's better to have 2 or 3 rounds of punch lists rather than one and still have things that are not picked up.
The punch list and the final review is a funny thing. The way I think about it is, it's like if anyone's ever moved, houses, right? You know that moving or packing up or unpacking, the first like 90% of the stuff goes at a certain pace. It's always the last like 5%, 10% of the items, the small stuff, that seems to take up a disproportionate amount of time and effort. Yeah. And the punch list can sometimes feel like that. Well,
if you think about it, like, the paint, you have to get the painter to come back to just fix one thing, and he has to bring all the crew, buy the paint, maybe repaint the whole room, like, and then you have to coordinate, like the flooring guy is also coming in to fix that. So, it's also like a sequencing and an orchestration of all of the people that need to come by and fix the things. But the punch list is super important, and as a client, like I would want to move in a house that's perfect. Like you're spending all your money into building that dream home. Like you want it to be new and in mint condition when you move in. Yeah. Which also touch base on something else. Oftentimes clients they want to rush moving in, right? And they're like, well, it's almost done. Like maybe I can move my furniture in, I can kind of like slowly move in, even if the contractor is finishing this and that. It's never a good idea. Like let the contractor do whatever they have to do to finish it. Yeah. And also it's not good for them because you might be the one damaging some of those things. And then, like asking them to pay for replacements. So, it's not cool. Like don't do that, just check in a hotel for a few days and or tell them like, can you hurry up a little bit so I can move in? But don't try to move in before you have the punch list completed and everybody gone.
I think the punch list, the discussion reminds me that the architect is also there to during CA to approve or to reject work based on the quality of the work. Yeah. So it's not just like, well, that's red tile and it should have been green. Like that's a glaring issue, and it was specified as being green or red that I had in the drawings. I've never specified green and red tile at the same time. But it's like, well, that was installed, but it's not quite good enough, right? You're supposed to do level 5 drywall. Not really that, right? The baseboards aren't really that clean of a line. The things aren't plumb. And that is also critical because for a client might not have the eye to catch mistakes. A client also, even if they do see a mistake, they might not know, like, is this okay? Is this supposed to be like accepted? Is this a standard, quality of construction for what I'm paying? And that's where the architect also, will provide some advice. There, to be honest, like there are construction projects where there's a lot of money being spent, and they're, let's say, luxury projects, and so everything's supposed to be perfect. And then there are construction projects that are more like mid-range, and both are perfectly fine. And so, yes, there is a scale of quality that's to be expected. If you're paying a premium on a contractor for a premium house, then you expect a premium product.
Yeah.
If you're doing a mid-range house, because that's what makes sense for you for whatever purposes, then there's a certain level of construction quality or minor defects that are like acceptable. And the architect is the one to know, you can't expect this of the contractor based on what we're doing here, or no, this should be correct. This should not be off by that much. We shouldn't see a wavy line where the walls meet the ceiling. And that's the kind of stuff that we're there for as well.
And I think that touches on why this construction administration matters to clients, right? It's because of that. I think it's also, like you mentioned, making sure that, materials that are being put in are the ones that have been approved. Mm-hmm. It's easy sometimes to be like, oh, this thing is cheaper, I'll just swap it, or, like put something else, like it's close enough. Like, no, if we specify specific things in the drawings, there is a reason behind it. Either it's a performance reason, it's a design reason, it's a cost reason too. So I think, having the architect's eye on it, make sure everything is, per the drawing is very important.
And now a little break for our show sponsors. Hey architects, would you like to get your as-built faster? Of course you would. Well, IPX has you covered. IPX lets you seamlessly transform your laser scans into LOD 300 BIM and CAD files. Whether you've got your 3D scans already or you need a full laser scanning service, IPX offers instant pricing and order tracking for scan to BIM services on any project, no matter the size or complexity. Once a building scan is complete, IPX delivers detailed BIM, CAD, 360-degree virtual tours, and material takeoffs in their platform where you can view, share, export, query, and quantify areas, floors, and materials. Check out the IPX link in our show notes. One of the best tools we've come across for project management and specifications is Programma, a remarkable all-in-one suite of bespoke tools for interior designers. With Programma, you can create schedules, mood boards, and invoices. It also allows you to share all of your project information with builders, trades, and clients with their very useful client dashboard. Projects can get complicated, but Programma makes it easy, saving you time so you can focus on design. Start thriving with Programma by clicking the link in our episode notes and use the code SecondStudio to save 25% off your annual subscription. It's a funny thing because as I mentioned, construction is when all the money is being spent and when it's the most stressful. And most architects provide construction administration on an hourly basis, meaning their fee is, based on how many hours they work during construction. And that makes sense, right? Because the amount of time we have to spend performing CA, it varies so much depending on all the factors that are outside of our control, namely the contractor. If I'm working with a contractor I've not worked with before, and let's say also in this example, it's the client has brought in the contractor and we told the client, like, I don't really think this is a good fit. And I'm telling you officially, I don't think we should use this person, but they choose them anyway. I know, and I will tell the client, as I have done, there's a good chance that the amount of time and effort I have to spend doing CA will be much higher with this contractor compared to another contractor who we've already vetted and we know, where things will go much more smoothly, not just because we know them, but because we know that they're good at their job. So CA is often provided at an hourly rate or basis. And so the positives of that, it means that you're just paying for the time, being spent on the work. The downside is that it's easy for clients to think, well, I'd rather save the $400 or $500 and not have the architect come out for the site visit or reply to a couple of emails, and we're just going to let that one slide by. Right? I'm going to wishful thinking it's going to work. That thing that's being talked about, the problem, the issue, it'll just be resolved and I can pocket $500 for myself or cut out the architect entirely from CA and save a little bit of money. And what I would say in response is that the amount of money spent on an architect relative to the amount of money for the entire project is very, very small. The value gained from an architect providing CA is huge, again, relative to the amount of money you're paying an architect to do CA. And so paying that amount of money to the architect does end up saving you headaches for sure, 100% stress. it will probably save time, and it will also probably honestly save you money in the end. Because without proper CA, something's going to get built incorrectly or wrong, and the client's going to try and problem solve it, and it's just going to go sideways.
And I think it also would save you stress.
Yeah.
If there is no architect on board for CA, the contractor is still going to have questions during construction, and who's going to have to answer those? The client will. And, it's one question, it's two questions, then it's a question, 5 questions every day for whatever length of construction the project would need. And it's a lot. Like for someone whose job is to do CA, it's no big deal because just, that's our job. For someone who has a job is now taking on a side job, to be doing CA on their project. And that is a lot of stress because you have no idea what they're talking about. Like, you asked me to fix the car myself or whatever. Like, I'm not a mechanic. Like, I'm going to have to go on YouTube and understand what piece do I need to change. Is this better than that? Should I go to this guy, that guy? Should I tow the car? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, so that's a good point because construction administration is not just about being, organized, prompt, timely, and all that kind of stuff, right? I think some people think, well, I'm very successful in my industry. I'm a very organized person. I'm a project manager. I can keep track of things, and I'm very logical. I know how to work with people well. I can do CA. And if you have the skill sets, that's a big part of CA for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, right? Because there's tough conversations that are going to be had, and you have to be able to navigate them tactfully. However, to your point of the car analogy, but you don't have the knowledge about construction. So how are you going to problem solve a construction issue with the contractor? This goes back also to the statement that design takes place during construction, right? Anytime there is an RFI or a question about a technical aspect of construction, I can guarantee you it has design implications, right? Because otherwise, why are they trying to talk to an architect? And so the problem-solving conversations that take place are not just technical ones, but there's design wrapped up into it as well. And you need to have someone who understands both sides of it and is able to speak the same language as the contractor, understand their point of view, and say, well, that's cool, and that makes sense. What if we do it this different way? Contractor says, no, for these reasons. Architect says, okay, you're right. Well, this third way. And that's how it goes. You can't have that kind of dialogue if you're a client, because you're just going to rely on whatever the contractor is saying. You don't have that collaborative kind of back and forth that's needed to actually solve the problem and have it turn out well in the end.
Yeah, and I think on the note of saving time, if the client is the one answering those RFI, it's gonna take them more time to answer them because they won't know how to answer them. And at the same time, the contractor is waiting, with their hands in their pockets and they're stuck. So it is. In the end, I think it costs more to not have the architect than having the architect on.
It will definitely cost more in 2 ways. It'll cost more if something is built, right? It's built wrong, and ideally an architect would have helped solve that before it takes place. And also on that note, when we do site visits, we're doing the site visits throughout construction. So sometimes we can catch a mistake. Let's say, how do we say it? Catch a mistake before that mistake kind of grows and festers. So, for example, we might catch this mistake during framing, which if no one caught it, you go from framing to electrical and plumbing to drywall to finished work. That's like a lot of stuff to take place. And now you don't catch it until the very end. You're like, well, this wall doesn't feel like it's in the right location. We're off by a little bit. And now the room is not the right size, or whatever amount of cabinetry we had is not the right proportion. Like, what happened? Well, the wall's in the wrong place. So we'd have to go back and redo that wall, redo several walls or whatever it is. So that's a good example of like the architect visiting the site during framing to catch something in that state, solve it then so it doesn't compound later on. And actually that happened to us where it's happened a couple times. And well, in one instance, and this is just shoddy craftsmanship, I guess you would call it, shoddy framing. A window was framed wrong. I got on site and we're going through. And again, we're not there to inspect. Like, we're supposed to be able to trust the contractor as much as, to a fair amount. But we're going through the site and I said, I've never seen a window framed that way. That's not correct, because it wasn't framed correctly. And so I'm like, unless there's some new way of framing windows that I've not learned about, but we've been framing windows this way with Type 5 construction for like a long time now, right? The header's supposed to go past the window and sit on a stud. It's not supposed to sit directly on the window with no stud. And so we had a conversation, and I don't know how that was framed that way, because any framer knows how to frame a window.
Maybe it wasn't the framer who framed it.
Ended up being corrected. In that case, what could have happened is a much more serious problem, because the thing could have been, the window installed, drywall up, everything done, and then later on you have a call it structural issue with the window, and the window sagger not being supported correctly.
That could have
right?
been terrible.
Because now you have load,
Yeah.
Weight sitting directly on the window, and the window is not meant to take the load. It's supposed to sit in an opening that's framed.
Yeah.
So that actually would have been probably really bad, a year or whatever down the line.
Yeah.
That's not just that, oh, my room's a little too small. That's like a problem.
Yeah.
And that also, framing is a good phrase to talk about, because framing is a moment in the project where it's very exciting to be on site. It's also very confusing and very chaotic. There's just a lot of stuff happening. There's like open sky, wood and plywood and whatever else is going on, right? And it's really hard to look at all of that chaos, and it's beautiful to look at, but look at the chaos and understand what you're seeing and whether or not it's correct. Only an architect who understands framing, per the window example, but also understands the drawing and the project so well.
I was going to say, only the person who came up with where the walls are going would know where you are in that maze.
Absolutely.
Right?
And say this wall feels off, this dimension, this whatever detail we have, it looks like it's smaller than I thought it would. We should check the drawings. And guess what? You misframed that. We're off by a foot. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying that all contractors make all these mistakes and the contractors suck. That's not the point of this, right? It's just complex. But in the framing state, no one would be able to catch it outside the architect.
Yeah, and it goes throughout the whole construction process.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about real world example of, like things that could be avoided, thanks to CA, is, for example, material substitution.
Yeah.
A client wouldn't be able to know. Did they use a product that was listed in the drawings? Like, maybe if they've seen samples, and they kept one, they'll be able to tell, that's not the same, tile that I picked. But we actually saw that on a I think it was a colleague's project, where a certain type of cabinet panel was specified.
Stylite,
a product called Stylite, which is, laminate, but like really good quality, like really clean edges.
Ultra flat.
So you don't see like the edge bending kind of like.
Ultra durable, ultra flat.
Yeah. And what happened is that the contractor on that project decided to substitute the Stylite, which is a higher end product, but in the long term, the price is high at the beginning, but in the long term, that product will last well for a long time, right? And the GC decided to go with something a little cheaper, another laminated panel. That had, if you go on like the extreme, he probably went, I don't know, to Home Depot or something. It was the most disgusting looking cabinet panel. And I'm like, but the thing that's wrong here is that, he charged the client the price of that expensive product. And that is where if you have the architect, along by your side during that process, to make sure that, in some cases you pick the wrong GC here, you don't get burned because you're paying for the premium product. You have to get the premium product.
I know, that's
and unless you know the difference and you know what the premium products looks like or remember what it looks like, you don't know what you're paying for. So that is why you need to keep your architect. Like they know exactly what they selected for the project. And sometimes you have other things that could happen, like the wrong product that was specified for the project got installed in the wrong spot. That happened to us on one of our projects where we had 2 different terrazzo being used, in a bathroom. And we go on site one day and the GC was so happy to say like, oh, look, I installed it. It looks beautiful. And I'm like, it looks beautiful, but I have bad news for you. You flipped it. It was the other way around. And, there was an intention behind that. It didn't make sense to keep it the way it was put. So it was good that we caught it right after they installed it, so they could rip it out and reinstall it correctly before the walls were going in and everything else, in that room was going in, because then you're talking about things you would not be able to fix. And again, it's not cool because the client paid for a design was approved, presented, thought about, detailed, documented. You need to get what you've paid for up until that point, right?
Yeah, and no one wants those kinds of mistakes. The architect certainly doesn't want it because we want to see the vision made into reality. The client doesn't want it because they want that vision in reality. And the contractor also doesn't want to have to redo work. And I think it's human error. Nobody's perfect. It happens. There's, again, so much stuff to read and people on site and all of that stuff. But I think there's two things that come to mind. One is the vision the architect has when they're visiting a site, because the framing example, like I said, is very chaotic. So the architect has kind of like an X-ray vision of the future, let's say. But it also happens when we get so far into the project where finished materials are being installed. I remember seeing the bathroom in that site visit, and when I stepped in, this does look amazing. I'm very happy with how this has turned out.
My face just dropped. I was like, I'm going to be the one who's going to ruin the party there.
But my point is, though, that in that phase of completion, when things look very nice, I think visually there's so much information coming in that it's easy not to see, quote, the details or the bigger things like material swaps by mistake, because you're overwhelmed with wow, I've never seen this before. And again, it tends to be the architect is the one who has the vision, because we've seen the 3D model of it in the computer and in our mind's eye for a year. And during construction, now it's been 2 years or 2.5 years. It's burned into our brains. So when we are on site, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the framing, yes, we're seeing whatever other phase we're in, but we're seeing the final vision. And that's the only way that we're able to almost instinctively say something doesn't feel right in this space. Oh yeah, you guys swapped the terrazzo. That's why it doesn't feel right. You swapped the terrazzo. It also reminds me that one of the great things about having an architect during CA or during construction and performing CA is that we can meet with the contractor before they embark on the next bit of work, whatever that is, this room, this type of work, whatever it is, and say, okay, let's review this space together and make sure we're on the same page before we start getting into it, just to make sure that we get it. And even then, mistakes happen.
Yeah. So maybe let's, kind of recap what construction administration is not.
Yeah.
For people to, just be clear on that.
Yeah. So we are not supervisors of the subs or the contractor, right? We're not there daily inspecting the work. Where our CA work stops, which is oversight, right? After that point, we have to trust the contractor. There has to be that level of trust. Yes, there have been projects where we've done projects where the contractor is really good and we trust them, and the CA work is lighter. We're still doing site visits and all that stuff. And yes, there have been times where the contractor is really bad and we have to pick up the slack, and where there's a lot of hand-holding. There's a lot of us explaining how things should be built correctly, right? To get it done correctly. And we can't do that. I'm not glad to do it because it means we've hired the wrong guy, but we certainly can do it. But there is that threshold where you don't want the architect to have to be doing that. That means we have the wrong team.
No,
right?
And I think also as another thing to mention is that there is an advantage in going with a contractor that your architect is accustomed to work with. There is an efficiency, like they've got a few trial runs here. They know how each other work. They know they can trust each other. They know how to communicate. That's going to make things more efficient. It's going to make things cheaper in the end because there will be less back and forth and less hand-holding or finger pointing or miscommunication or no communication, or feelings getting hurt and whatever egos could go on, right?
Yeah.
That being said, most architects are always interested in working with new people because if you find
a longer list. We always want a longer list.
Well, and contractors get busy too. You need to, to have different ones available in your pocket. But I would say if your architect's I really think this guy is the person to go with, or I think they could do a really good job for the same price as another guy, I would listen to them because there is, again, a lot of advantage in that relationship.
I agree. And I would say even more so is if the architect is saying, do not hire this person, I don't get a good vibe about the whole thing, you really, really should listen to them.
Yeah, and
you really should.
And I think also clients need to understand that we don't gain anything if you go with, like financially, let's say, if you go with one or the other.
Yeah.
Like if anything, like we're trying to avoid getting more stress, more headache, clients are not happy. Like,
and actually, to be honest,
like, what you pay them is what you pay them. What you pay us is what you pay us. Like, I'm not looking to do more CA and babysitting,
exactly
right? Like that is not why I signed up for architecture.
So it's a funny. So let's also talk about like the personality of the average architect or the architecture office that's very design focused. We're not just a drafting services permit. Like we care about design. We design beautiful things. We don't want to be doing CA to that level. Right.
It sounds fun.
I mean, I like CA because I actually get to be on site and see stuff, and that's as close to the action as I ever get to do as an architect. And I do miss making things by hand. But outside of that, personal kind of emotion toward construction, it's almost like the ideal project is I don't have to do any CA. I want projects to be realized, and I do CA to make sure that happens. The lesser amount of CA I have to do, the better, because the more time I can be spent, designing more cool stuff or whatever else. So actually it's we're on the same page with the client. And also, yes, it's true. If I'm doing less CA, I guess the office is making less money because we're not getting paid per hour, but I don't care.
Yeah, but I would rather have more hours to design more projects than doing more of that, project management in some ways, right?
And we, any experienced architect will tell a client too, I think, at least we do, when it comes to selecting a contractor, like, look, I'm advising you which contractor to use and not to use for the sake of you, for the project, and for myself. Because I do not want to work with someone who doesn't know their stuff.
Yeah,
I've done it before.
Yeah, and
I've been too optimistic about people. I'm not doing that again.
And what's interesting too is that most times for clients it's the first time that they do a project. So they think about it as like their first time. For us, it's like, we've got experience, doing other projects. We've done others before. We've run through those things before. We're talking out of that experience,
right.
You want to hire your buddy to do the work, like that's fine. But you know what? I've done projects where that happened. It didn't go well. So trust me if I tell you it's not going to work out. Like you're hopeful because it's your first time. It's your buddy, but I can tell you, I've been through that before. So, I think that should mean something to clients.
That's a really good point because everybody who's embarking on a construction project for the first time, there's always a little bit of wishful thinking, right? There's always a little bit like, I think I could be the lucky one. I think I could hack it, right? How complex can it be really that bad? I think I can make use of, my cousin's sister, my cousin's boyfriend's whatever person. I think it'll be okay. Again, any seasoned architect or contractor or engineer or any professional will be like, nope, not doing that. We're not doing wishful thinking. Because the projects themselves have their own life, and construction takes on a life of its own. And the project itself will bring enough problems to the table already, and we don't need to allow more problems to occur with wishful thinking. So,
I know. Yeah. So to that point, I would say construction administration is not optional. At least for us, it's not optional because I'm not interested in spending time, energy, emotions, into designing something I care about for the clients, and kind of like shake my hands and hope for the best. Yeah. Like that's not what I'm in for. Like I'm in to see it built, to see it done, to make sure that everybody's happy, that things went the right way, and all of that, and that, to be completely fair, there is architects who are completely fine with, shaking their hands and moving on after permits and all of that. And that's fine. Maybe it's about finding the right fit. If clients are looking for that, then hire that person.
So you're right that there's different services for different people and, to each their own to a certain degree. But if I'm a client, if you're a listener and you're a client and you care about the design quality and the quality of construction and the outcome, do not use an architect who's telling you that they're willing to do a project without doing CA.
Yeah,
because that means they don't care. It means they don't care.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing too about CA is that construction administration tends to be the phase where architects lose money. It's the phase also where it's the most headache, it's the most stressful, because now you're having to have difficult conversation with contractors. They want to swap the materials or whatever it is. It's not the most pleasant phase, right? And there has been a growing trend, probably the last 10 to 15 years, of architects in the residential space of not doing CA and just handing drawings off. And I'm telling you, it's a disservice to clients, to contractors, to the built environment, to the cities, to the profession of architecture. And those architects are doing it because it's the easier path. Much easier for me to draw some cool stuff, hand it off, and not care. And by the way, also, if my mentality toward a project is to do the drawings and then hand it off, and then, good luck, or just call me if there's an issue, I can guarantee you that architect is not putting the time needed to produce high-level construction documents because they're not there during construction.
And I can guarantee you that the design is not good either.
Sure. But what I'm saying is,
this person is doing that for easy money making and not for much more than that. Anybody who cares about architecture, I think, would see it through.
But there's also architects who care about design, but they don't understand how things get built. So they do design drawings.
Then you're a paper architect.
So they do construction documents that are not really construction documents. They call them that, but really they're design drawings, and then they hand them off, right? If you're an architect and you really care about the end product, you're doing CA. I don't know any good architect who doesn't do CA. If you're doing CA, you could bet your ass we're going to work really hard to produce really good construction documents because it saves us. It saves the contractor, the client, headache. It saves us headache too by doing really good construction documents. It all trickles backward. So yeah, again, if you care at all about your project, I can't imagine ever hiring an architect who was like, I don't do CA, or I do CA, but what that really means is that you just call me if there's a problem. That's not CA.
Yeah, no.
That's someone being around to answer a phone call in case there's an issue. That's not.
It's a drafter. It's what.
Yeah, what is that? But I also want to clarify one of the things that we don't do as part of our construction administration services. This might be a detail, but we don't do construction management, which means that we're not talking directly to the subcontractors. There is a very, let's say, official way of communication in these projects. And so let's say we come across an issue on site. I don't talk to the tile installer and say, hey, you're doing that wrong. Do it differently. And I'm the architect, so do it differently. No. We don't do that. I talk to the contractor. I say, hey, contractor, was on site, or maybe he's there, whatever. A phone call, I saw this, it didn't seem right, talk it through. Then they talk to their subs. That order of communication is super critical. That same exactness of communication applies when we talk about contractor, client, and architect, right? The contractor should never, ever, ever talk directly to the client about anything that has design implications, or rather they shouldn't make suggestions with the architects present. That's up to the architects. And all good contractors know that too. It's not that if we're having a roundtable meeting, then there's a problem, then of course the contractor should talk about it, but there should be no time when the contractor calls or emails the client directly and says, what if we swap out this material, or what if we do this detail differently because it's going to save us time and money? That should never happen.
Well, and I think it's a matter of respecting each other's expertise.
Yeah.
I wouldn't tell a contractor how to put together, the formwork for a concrete wall.
Well,
I mean,
unless they're really bad. Yeah.
Unless they're terrible, and I have to tell them, which why would you listen to me? But
yeah.
I think it is a collaborative process, and I think it needs to feel like that, and therefore there needs to be mutual respect.
And by the way, it's not that our role as the architect is just to oversee the contractor and just scold them and tell them what to do to make it better or this and that. It's not really the case. Yes, we're providing oversight. So yeah, there's like a shade of that, but I'll say that good contractors and good architects, they want to work with each other, and all the contractors we care to work with, they do not want to do a project unless the architect is doing CA. So it goes both ways, right? This is not just architects, professing and claiming that a CA is this great thing. Contractors who care about their work are like, no, I'm not building your house if you're not going to have your architect do CA. Are you crazy? I don't want to be talking to the client about, this and that design things in construction details. Why would they? Right?
Well, that, and I think, again, if you're a professional, you care about what you do. You want the customer to be happy in the end, right? And I mean, if you're not gonna have an architect, then it's just gonna be between. I think it's good to have the three legs to that stool, because it just kind of like keeps each other accountable.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, then it's just back and forth, and who's right, who's wrong. And I don't know.
It doesn't work. And so like we were talking about. So we're talking about vetting architects in a certain sense, and whether or not CA is part of their services is one way to vet them. The same thing goes for contractors also. So actually, one of the questions I would ask a contractor is whether or not they're comfortable doing a project where the architect is not providing CA services. And if a contractor says, yeah, I do it all the time. I build stuff all the time without an architect having any input at all during construction. That is a major red flag.
What another question
Huge
is,
red flag.
Asking the GC, like, have you worked with architects
Then you've
before?
not worked with good architects.
Then
You're missing something here.
yeah.
You're missing a third of the three.
Well, I mean, look, it could work out, but it's like a whole other kind of product you're going to get. So I think
A lower level product.
Expectations
Yeah.
have to be adjusted. Okay, I think that's.
I think we covered a lot
I think
of
we
it.
covered a lot.
There's probably
and
yeah, but construction takes like 2.5 years, so there's probably things we missed, but we'll do a follow-up recording maybe.
And I mean, and to kind of like add on to the stress reliever of having an architect on board doing CA, I think also there's going to be a ton of questions that the contractor is going to have, and having someone that those questions go to that's not the client, and just hear about the ones that as a client you need to hear about.
You mean as the architect being the filter or the bridge in a certain sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, there's a question about what type of screw you're using here, or like the hinges or whatever. Like, as a client, you don't need to know. You just need to know the door is going to work. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Yeah.
Like, I think it's good to have someone who's just kind of like going to skim the fat out of the questions and just let you know like what's important and what you need to be thinking about before you go to bed every night, and what you're not going to need to think about.
Yeah.
No, but because
that's true.
it does bring a level of stress to have to decide and figure things out. So, yeah, just...
It's a level of stress, and also I think for clients who are unfamiliar with any of this, sometimes small things to them can feel like a much bigger problem than we would feel.
Yeah.
Because I'm not trying to downplay the problem, whatever it is, but because we know that there's a solution. Well, we already know there's 3 ways to solve this, so don't fret about it. And we know that's not going to have a cost or time implication. Don't fret about it. And I think that's a good point. It's a real big part of the value that we bring.
Yeah. Yeah. So as a conclusion, I would say that, construction administration is a very important phase, because again, that is when the design becomes reality, right? If you're thinking that's where you can save money from your architect, really ask your architect, like, how is the fee being split across all of the phases? Because you're going to see that construction administration is not necessarily where, it is the most. And then look at that number in conjunction
across the project budget
to the whole project budget, and then, really understand, like, if you need to save money, there's probably better avenues to do that than construction administration.
The last thing I'll say, the saving the money, it comes by doing things properly and planning properly.
From the beginning. Yeah, I know.
Shortcuts don't equal saving money in construction.
No.
It just doesn't work out that way. I mean, again, seen it many, many times. Everyone thinks they can take a shortcut and save money. It doesn't work. Saving money means doing things properly, being efficient, having a good team, all of that classic, typical stuff. That's the way that you save money and be efficient.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. If there's anything about CA we didn't cover, which I know we're missing stuff, then let us know. We're more than happy to, again, talk about this again. And if, I don't know, what else is there? Any questions about anything else about design and architecture, let us know, and we can cover it in an episode. We're always looking for topics to cover.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, watching this episode. I hope you at least learn a little something. If you like what we do, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, everywhere you can find us. We're on social media, Facebook and Instagram mostly. We have the website, secondstudiopod.com, where all of the episodes are listed. And we have the hotline, 213-222, that you can send a text message to. And it's been a long day. 213-222-6950.
Yeah.
You can send a text message or call and leave a voicemail. If you have any questions, any more things you want to learn about CA, feel free to send us a message.
And of course, you can find our office, which is Fame Architecture and Design, Fame_Architects as our IG, and we're there on Instagram, Facebook, and the website, and everything else. So yeah, reach out, talk soon. Thanks for listening, and that's it. Bye.
Yep. Bye-bye.